The dust from Rachel Turner's wagon wheels hadn't yet settled when she realized that leaving her husband's compound with nothing but a stolen horse and the clothes on her back might have been the easy part. The hard part would be surviving what came next. She had been Samuel Whitmore's fourth wife for exactly 8 months, and in that time she had learned that hell wasn't a place of fire and brimstone, but a sprawling ranch in the Utah Territory where women competed for scraps of attention and children ran wild like forgotten livestock. Rachel was 19 years old, and she had made the biggest mistake of her life when she believed Samuel's smooth words about providing security and family. What he hadn't mentioned was that she would be sharing him with 3 other women, with whispers of a 5th bride already being courted in the nearby settlement. The year was 1878, and the Utah Territory was still grappling with the complexities of plural marriage, even as the federal government grew increasingly hostile to the practice. Rachel's father had died 2 years prior, leaving her mother struggling to feed 4 younger siblings. When Samuel had come calling with promises of taking one burden off her mother's shoulders, Rachel had accepted, thinking she was doing something noble. Instead, she found herself trapped in a hierarchy where the first wife ruled with an iron fist, the second wife schemed constantly, and the third wife had already grown hollow-eyed and defeated. Rachel had begun planning her escape after the first month. It took 7 more months to gather the courage and the means. She had stolen a horse in the dead of night, taken what little money she had managed to hide away, and ridden west with her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Now, 3 days later, she found herself in Red Bluff, California, a rough town that had grown up around the mining industry and cattle trade. The Sacramento River ran nearby, providing life to an otherwise harsh landscape. Red Bluff was the kind of place where people didn't ask too many questions, which suited Rachel just fine. She had sold the horse that morning, knowing it could be traced back to Samuel, and used the money to purchase a ticket on the next stagecoach heading further west. She had 6 hours before it departed. Rachel sat in a small restaurant making a single bowl of stew last as long as possible, when the door swung open and a man walked in who seemed to command the entire room without saying a word. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin that spoke of years working under the California sky. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and slightly too long, curling at the collar of his worn shirt. But it was his eyes that caught Rachel's attention, a striking blue-gray that seemed to take in everything at once. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing more of his weathered but handsome face, and nodded politely to the few patrons scattered around the room. When his gaze landed on Rachel, she quickly looked down at her bowl, her heart suddenly racing for an entirely different reason than fear. "Samuel Briggs," she heard the proprietor greet him warmly. "Haven't seen you in town for a few weeks." "Been busy with the herd, Martin," the man replied, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in Rachel's chest. "Finally got them settled in the northern pasture. Thought I'd treat myself to a decent meal before heading back." Rachel risked another glance and found that Samuel Briggs had taken a seat at a table not far from hers. He was studying the simple menu board on the wall, but she could feel his attention occasionally drift in her direction. She must have looked out of place. A young woman traveling alone, her dress dusty from the road and her hair hastily pinned up that morning without the benefit of a proper mirror. "You look like you have been traveling," a voice said, and Rachel nearly jumped out of her skin. Samuel Briggs had risen from his table and now stood beside hers, his hat in his hands and a concerned expression on his face. "Pardon me for being forward, miss, but are you all right? You seem troubled." Rachel's first instinct was to lie, to smile, and assure him everything was fine. But something in his eyes, a genuine kindness that she hadn't seen in a man's face for far too long, made her hesitate. "I am managing, thank you," she said carefully, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel glanced at the proprietor, then back at Rachel. "Martin makes the best beef stew in 3 counties, but his coffee is even better. Would you permit me to buy you a cup? No strings attached, just one traveler being kind to another." She should have said no. She should have kept her head down and waited for her stagecoach in silence, but Rachel found herself nodding, and Samuel Briggs pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, his movements careful and respectful, keeping a proper distance. Samuel Briggs, he introduced himself formally. I run a cattle operation about 10 miles north of here. Rachel, she replied, then hesitated before adding, Rachel Turner. She watched his face carefully, but there was no recognition, no indication that he had heard about a runaway wife from Utah Territory. Of course he hadn't. Samuel Whitmore wouldn't dare report her missing to the authorities, not when it would invite questions about his household arrangements that he couldn't afford to answer. Where are you headed, Miss Turner? Samuel asked after Martin brought over 2 cups of strong, hot coffee. San Francisco, Rachel lied smoothly. She actually had no destination in mind beyond away, but San Francisco seemed like a reasonable answer. Samuel's eyebrows rose slightly. That is quite a journey for a woman traveling alone, if you do not mind me saying. Do you have family there? An aunt, Rachel added to her growing web of lies. She hated lying, but the truth was far too complicated and dangerous to share with a stranger, no matter how kind his eyes seemed. They fell into an easy conversation, or as easy as it could be with Rachel guarding every word. Samuel told her about his ranch, how he had built it up from nothing over the past 6 years. He spoke of the challenges of the California climate, the dry summers and the occasional harsh winters, the constant struggle to keep his cattle watered and healthy. He had started with 50 head of cattle and now ran nearly 300, a success he attributed to hard work and a bit of luck. Do you have help? Rachel asked, genuinely curious despite herself. That seems like a lot for one man to manage. I have 3 men who work for me, good steady hands, and a woman, Mrs. Chen, who manages the house and the cooking. Her husband works for me as well. They are good people. Samuel paused, taking a sip of his coffee. It is a hard life, but it is honest, and it is mine. No one tells me what to do or how to live. There was something in the way he said those last words that made Rachel's throat tighten. Freedom. He was talking about freedom, something she had only just tasted and was already terrified of losing. That must be wonderful, she said softly, to be your own master. Samuel studied her for a long moment, and Rachel had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her carefully constructed facade. Miss Turner, I do not mean to pry, but are you running from something? Rachel's hand trembled slightly as she set down her coffee cup. I do not know what you mean. I have been around enough frightened creatures, human and animal alike, to recognize the signs, Samuel said gently. You keep watching the door like you expect someone to come bursting through it. You have been making that bowl of stew last for over an hour, which tells me you are trying to stretch your money as far as it will go. And your dress, while well made, is not designed for hard travel, which means you left in a hurry. Rachel felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in front of this stranger, no matter how perceptive or kind he seemed. I am fine. I thank you for the coffee, but I should go. She started to rise, but Samuel held up a hand. Wait, please. I am not trying to frighten you or cause you trouble. Quite the opposite. He leaned forward, his voice dropping even lower. If you are running from danger, San Francisco is expensive, and the stagecoach only gets you partway there. You will need more money than you have, I would wager. Are you offering me charity? Rachel asked, her pride flaring despite her desperate circumstances. No, Samuel said firmly. I am offering you work. Mrs. Chen has been asking me to hire additional help around the house. She is not as young as she used to be, and during calving season and roundup, cooking for 5 hungry men wears her down. She could use an assistant, room and board provided, plus wages. It would give you a chance to save up money for your journey and provide a safe place to stay in the meantime. Rachel stared at him, searching for the trap. There had to be a trap. Men did not simply offer solutions to women's problems without expecting something in return. Why would you help me? You do not even know me. Samuel sat back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. My mother left my father when I was 12 years old. He was a drunk and a mean one at that. She took me and my sister, and we ran in the middle of the night, just like I suspect you did. We ended up in a town not unlike this one, broke and scared. A rancher and his wife gave my mother work and a safe place for us to stay. It saved our lives. He met Rachel's eyes directly. I figure I owe it to pay that kindness forward when I can. There was a sincerity in his voice that Rachel wanted desperately to believe, but trust had been beaten out of her over the past 8 months, replaced with suspicion and fear. I do not know, she whispered. Tell me this, Samuel said. What are you more afraid of, taking a risk on a job that might help you get on your feet, or getting on that stagecoach with barely enough money to make it to Sacramento, let alone San Francisco? He had a point. Rachel had been trying not to think about what would happen when her money ran out. She had enough for the stagecoach ticket and perhaps 2 or 3 more meals if she was careful. After that, she would be destitute in a strange city with no prospects and no safety net. At least Samuel's offer would give her time to plan, to save up a proper stake for her future. If I do not like it, I can leave, Rachel asked, needing that assurance. Anytime you want, Samuel promised. You would be an employee, nothing more. You would have your own room in the house, separate from everyone else. Mrs. Chen is there, which I hope makes you feel more comfortable about the arrangement. And my men know better than to bother the household staff. I run a respectable operation. Rachel took a deep breath, weighing her limited options. Finally, she nodded. All right, I will try it. But Mr. Briggs, I need you to understand something. If anyone comes asking about me, anyone at all, I was never here. You never met me. Samuel's expression grew serious. You have my word, but Miss Turner, if whoever you are running from finds you, my ranch is defensible, and my men are loyal, you would not face trouble alone. It was more than anyone had offered her in a very long time. Rachel felt the tight knot of fear in her chest loosen just slightly. Thank you, she said, and meant it. After retrieving her small bag from the stagecoach office and getting a refund on her ticket, Rachel found herself sitting beside Samuel Briggs on a wagon heading north out of Red Bluff. The afternoon sun beat down on them as they traveled along a dusty road that wound through increasingly rugged terrain. To the west, the Coast Ranges rose in the distance, while to the east, the Sacramento Valley stretched out in shades of gold and brown. Samuel kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the area. There was Antelope Creek, which sometimes flooded in the spring but was now reduced to a trickle in the summer heat. There was the old Peterson place, abandoned after a harsh winter had killed off most of their herd. There was the stand of oaks where he sometimes sheltered his cattle during the worst of the summer sun. You really love this land, Rachel observed, watching the way his face lit up when he talked about it. I do, Samuel admitted. I know it is not easy country. The summers are brutal, and the winters can be harsh. Water is always a concern, and there are predators, both animal and human. But it is mine. I worked for every acre, every head of cattle. No one handed me anything, which means no one can take it away. Do you understand what I mean? I do, Rachel said, and she did. She understood the desperate need for something that belonged to you and you alone, something that could not be claimed or shared or divided up among others. It was what she had been searching for when she fled Samuel Whitmore's compound. They arrived at the Briggs Ranch as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. The main house was a sturdy structure of wood and stone, built to withstand the elements. It was not fancy, but it was well maintained, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. Behind the house stood a barn, several outbuildings, and a series of corrals where Rachel could see horses and cattle. A woman emerged from the house as they pulled up, wiping her hands on her apron. She was small and slim, probably in her 50s, with gray, streaked black hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her face was weathered but kind, with smile lines around her eyes. Mrs. Chen, Samuel called out as he hopped down from the wagon, I brought you that help you have been asking for. This is Miss Rachel Turner. Miss Turner, this is Mrs. Chen, the woman who really runs this place. Mrs. Chen swatted at Samuel's arm good-naturedly before turning to Rachel with assessing eyes. Rachel had the feeling she was being thoroughly evaluated in those few seconds, but whatever Mrs. Chen saw must have been acceptable because her expression softened into a welcoming smile. Come inside, child, Mrs. Chen said, her accent revealing her Chinese heritage. You look exhausted. When did you last have a proper meal and a good night's sleep? I do not really remember, Rachel admitted, suddenly aware of just how tired she truly was. The adrenaline that had kept her moving for the past 3 days was fading, leaving her shaky and hollow. Mrs. Chen clucked her tongue disapprovingly and took Rachel's bag. "Mr. Briggs, you go tend to your animals. I will take care of Miss Turner. Shoo now." Samuel grinned, and Rachel was struck by how the expression transformed his face, making him look younger and more carefree. "Yes, madam. I know better than to argue with you." He tipped his hat to Rachel. "Welcome to the Briggs Ranch, Miss Turner. I hope you will be comfortable here." As Samuel strode off toward the barn, Mrs. Chen ushered Rachel into the house. The interior was simple but clean, with sturdy furniture and windows that let in plenty of light. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large table dominating the center and a stone fireplace along one wall. Doors led off to what Rachel assumed were bedrooms. "Your room is through here," Mrs. Chen said, leading Rachel down a short hallway. She opened a door to reveal a small but private space with a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window overlooking the eastern pastures. "It is not much, but it is clean, and the roof does not leak. Dinner is in 2 hours. That gives you time to wash up and rest a bit. Do you have other clothes?" Rachel shook her head, suddenly embarrassed. "Just what I'm wearing." You are about the size I was 20 years ago. I have some work dresses that should fit you well enough until you can buy your own. I will bring them by. Now rest, child. You are safe here." Those words, "you are safe here," nearly broke Rachel's carefully maintained composure. She waited until Mrs. Chen had left and closed the door before sinking onto the bed and allowing herself to cry for the first time since leaving Utah territory. She cried for the innocence she had lost, for the future she had once imagined, for the fear and loneliness that had been her constant companions. But she also cried with relief because for the first time in 8 months she was in a place where she was not just one of many, where she was seen as an individual rather than a number in someone's collection. Rachel washed her face in the basin on the washstand, using the cool water to erase the evidence of her tears. She unpinned her hair and brushed it out, marveling at the simple luxury of having privacy to do so. At Samuel Whitmore's compound, privacy had been a rare commodity. The wives shared most spaces, and there had always been someone watching, someone judging, someone ready to report back to Samuel or the first wife about any perceived transgression. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Chen entered with an armful of simple cotton dresses in practical colors like brown, dark blue, and gray. "Try these on and see what fits. Keep whatever works. I have no use for them anymore." "I cannot just take your clothes," Rachel protested. Mrs. Chen fixed her with a knowing look. "Child, I have been where you are. Maybe the details were different, but I recognize a woman who has run from something. Take the clothes. Accept the help. When you're on your feet and able, you can pay it forward to someone else who needs it. That is how kindness works." Rachel felt fresh tears threatening, but managed to hold them back. "Thank you," she whispered. "Now rest," Mrs. Chen ordered gently. "Dinner will be ready soon, and tomorrow your work begins. I hope you know how to cook and clean because I plan to put you to work." Despite everything, Rachel found herself smiling. "I know how to do both. I am a hard worker, I promise." "Good," Mrs. Chen said with satisfaction. "Mr. Briggs does not tolerate laziness, but he is fair and decent. You will do well here if you are honest and work hard." After Mrs. Chen left, Rachel tried on the dresses and found that 3 of them fit reasonably well. She changed into a dark blue one, appreciating the way the sturdy fabric and simple cut would hold up to housework far better than her current dress, which had been selected by the first wife as appropriate for a plural marriage household. Rachel hated that dress and everything it represented. She lay down on the bed, intending to rest for just a few minutes, but exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When she woke, the light outside her window had shifted, and she could hear the low rumble of male voices from the main room. Panic seized her for a moment before she remembered where she was. She was not in the compound. She was at the Briggs Ranch, And those voices belonged to Samuel and his workers, not to Samuel Whitmore and his enforcers. Rachel quickly pinned up her hair and made her way to the main room. 5 men sat around the large table, with Mrs. Chen bustling about serving up plates of food. The smell of roasted meat, fresh bread, and vegetables made Rachel's mouth water. "There you are," Mrs. Chen said with approval. "You look better already. Come, sit down. There is plenty of food. Gentlemen, this is Miss Rachel Turner. She will be helping me around the house. I expect you all to treat her with respect." The 3 men Rachel did not know all nodded politely, though she caught them exchanging curious glances. Samuel smiled at her from his seat at the head of the table. "Glad you could join us, Miss Turner. I hope the accommodations are satisfactory." "Very much so, thank you," Rachel said, taking the empty seat between Mrs. Chen and one of the ranch hands, a weathered man with gray hair and a neatly trimmed beard. "That is Tom Harper on your left," Samuel said, gesturing to the gray-haired man. "He is my foreman and has been with me since the beginning. The young man across from you is David Walsh, my best wrangler, and that is Mr. Chen at the end, Mrs. Chen's husband, and the best tracker in 3 counties. Mr. Chen, a slender man about the same age as his wife, nodded at Rachel with a slight smile. "Welcome to the ranch, Miss Turner." The conversation flowed easily around the table as they ate, with the men discussing the day's work, plans for the coming weeks, and the usual challenges of ranch life. Rachel remained mostly quiet, content to listen and eat what was truly the best meal she had had in months. Mrs. Chen's cooking was exceptional, and Rachel found herself eating more than was probably ladylike, but no one seemed to judge her for it. "We start early around here," Samuel said, addressing Rachel directly. "Breakfast is at sunrise, and everyone works until the day's tasks are done. You will be helping Mrs. Chen with cooking, cleaning, laundry, mending, and whatever else needs doing. She will teach you the routine. Sundays are for rest and personal time. You will get 3 meals a day, your room, and $15 a month in wages. Does that sound fair?" $15 a month was more than Rachel had expected. At Samuel Whitmore's compound, the wives were not paid at all for their labor. Every penny belonged to Samuel. "That is more than fair," Rachel said. "Thank you, Mr. Briggs." "Just Samuel is fine when we are at the ranch," he said. "We are not formal folks out here." As the meal wound down and the men headed back outside to tend to evening chores, Mrs. Chen enlisted Rachel's help with cleaning up. They fell into an easy rhythm, with Rachel washing dishes while Mrs. Chen dried and put them away. "Samuel is a good man," Mrs. Chen said quietly, as if reading Rachel's thoughts. "He treats everyone fairly and pays honest wages. But I will tell you something, child. In the 6 years I have worked for him, I have never seen him bring home a stray before. Whatever story you told him, whatever he saw in you, it moved him to help. Do not make him regret that kindness." "I would not," Rachel said earnestly. "I promise you, Mrs. Chen, I am not here to cause trouble. I just need a safe place to land for a little while." Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "That is all I needed to hear. Now let me tell you about the routine around here, so you know what to expect." The next few weeks passed in a blur of hard work and gradual healing. Rachel rose before dawn each day to help Mrs. Chen prepare breakfast for the men. After they had eaten and headed out to work, she and Mrs. Chen would clean up, then move on to the day's other tasks. There was always something that needed doing. Laundry, mending, bread baking, vegetable tending in Mrs. Chen's small garden, preserving food for the winter, cleaning, and preparing the next meal. It was exhausting work, but it was honest work, and Rachel found a strange peace in the simple routine of it. No one questioned her. No one tried to control her every movement. No one made her feel like she was just an interchangeable part in a larger machine. She was Rachel, the household assistant, and she was valued for her efforts. Samuel was often out on the range with his men, but when he was around the house, he always treated Rachel with unfailing courtesy. He never pressed her for details about her past, never made her feel uncomfortable, and always thanked her for her work. Rachel found herself watching for him, looking forward to his presence in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. She should not be thinking about Samuel Briggs as anything other than her employer. She was technically still married, even though that marriage was a sham she wanted nothing to do with. And yet she could not help but notice the way Samuel's eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he handled even the most difficult situations with calm competence, the way he treated everyone around him with respect and fairness. One evening, about 3 weeks after Rachel's arrival, a summer storm rolled in from the west. The wind picked up suddenly, sending dust devils swirling across the yard, and the sky darkened to an ominous purple gray. Rachel had been hanging laundry when the first drops of rain began to fall, and she hurried to gather the clothes before they got soaked. She was struggling with a large sheet that had caught the wind when strong hands reached up to help her. Samuel appeared at her side, his hair already plastered to his head from the rain that was now falling in earnest. "Get inside," he shouted over the wind. "I will finish this." "I can help," Rachel shouted back. But Samuel was already gathering the remaining clothes with quick, efficient movements. They ran for the house together, laughing despite being thoroughly drenched. Inside, Mrs. Chen took one look at them and shook her head. "Both of you dripping all over my clean floor. Go get changed before you catch your death." Rachel hurried to her room and changed into a dry dress, toweling her hair as best she could. When she emerged, she found Samuel in the main room, also changed, standing by the window and watching the storm rage outside. "We needed this rain," he said without turning around. "The creeks were getting too low, and the cattle were having to range farther for water. This storm might make the next few weeks easier." Rachel joined him at the window, watching lightning fork across the darkened sky. "It is beautiful in a frightening way." "Most beautiful things are a little frightening, do not you think?" Samuel said. And when Rachel glanced at him, she found him looking at her rather than at the storm. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Rachel could not quite name. Then Mrs. Chen called from the kitchen, breaking the spell, and they both turned away. But something had shifted. Rachel became increasingly aware of Samuel's presence, and she could not help but notice that he seemed to be finding more reasons to be around the house. He would linger over breakfast, or come in for lunch instead of eating out on the range with the men, or arrive early for dinner and help carry water or chop wood for the stove. One Saturday evening, after a particularly long week of work preparing for the fall roundup, Samuel asked Rachel if she would like to take a walk with him. Mrs. Chen had retired early and the ranch hands were playing cards in the bunkhouse. The air was cool and pleasant after the heat of the day, and the stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, heading toward a small rise that overlooked the ranch. From the top, Rachel could see the house and outbuildings, the corrals where the horses moved like shadows, and the vast expanse of land beyond. "I want to ask you something," Samuel said, his voice serious. "And I want you to know you do not have to answer if you do not want to." Rachel's heart began to race. "All right. Were you married? To the person you ran from?" Rachel closed her eyes, debating how much to tell him. But she had been hiding for weeks now, and she was tired of lies and omissions. Samuel had been nothing but kind and honorable. He deserved at least some portion of the truth. "Yes," she said quietly, "I was married, in a manner of speaking." "In a manner of speaking?" Samuel repeated, his brow furrowing. Rachel took a deep breath. "I was one of 4 wives. My husband practiced plural marriage. I did not understand what that meant when I agreed to marry him. I thought I was doing something noble, helping my family, securing my future. Instead, I found myself in a situation where I was just one of many, where my thoughts and feelings did not matter, where I was expected to share everything, even things that should never be shared." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight with controlled anger. "He had 4 wives?" "He was courting a 5th when I left," Rachel said. "I could not bear it anymore. The hierarchy, the competition, the constant feeling of not being enough. I was not his wife. I was his possession, to be added to his collection." "Where was this?" Samuel asked. "Utah Territory," Rachel admitted. "I do not want to say more than that. I am afraid that if he finds me, he will try to take me back, or worse." Samuel turned to face her fully, his expression fierce in the starlight. Rachel, listen to me. You are not going back to that. I do not care how many men he sends or what claims he makes. You are under my protection now, and I will not let anyone take you against your will." The intensity in his voice made Rachel's breath catch. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" Samuel reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and gently took her hand. "Because from the moment I saw you in that restaurant looking scared and alone but still holding your head high, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. Because you work harder than anyone I have ever met and never complain. Because you have this way of finding joy in small things, like the way you smiled when Mrs. Chen's tomatoes finally ripened, or the way you laugh at Tom's terrible jokes at dinner. Because you are strong and brave and beautiful, and you deserve to be someone's only choice, not just one of many." Rachel felt tears streaming down her face, but for once they were not tears of fear or sadness. "Samuel, I do not know if I can be what you want. I am damaged. What I went through, it changed me." "We are all damaged in some way," Samuel said gently. "I am not looking for perfection, Rachel. I am just looking for someone real, someone honest, someone who wants to build a life based on mutual respect and partnership, not ownership. Someone who wants to be chosen every day, not just on a wedding day." "That is what I want," Rachel whispered, "more than anything. But Samuel, I am still legally married even if I never want to see that man again." "Then we will figure it out," Samuel said firmly. "Divorce is possible, even if it is complicated. And in the meantime, I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am just asking if I can court you properly, if I can get to know you better and let you know me. No pressure, no expectations beyond seeing where this might lead. You still have your job in your room, no matter what you decide about us. Your security here is not dependent on your feelings for me. I need you to understand that." It was everything Rachel had not dared to hope for. A man who saw her as an individual, who wanted to court her properly, who was promising to put her needs and comfort first. It was the opposite of everything she had experienced with Samuel Whitmore. "I would like that," Rachel said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I would like that very much. But Samuel, you need to know that I do not know how to be courted. My marriage was arranged. There was no courtship, no romance. I do not know the rules." Samuel smiled, and even in the dim light, Rachel could see the warmth in his eyes. "Then we will make our own rules. How does that sound?" "Perfect," Rachel whispered. Samuel raised her hand to his lips and placed a gentle kiss on her knuckles, a gesture so sweet and old-fashioned that it made Rachel's heart flutter. "Then let us head back before Mrs. Chen sends out a search party. But Rachel, thank you. Thank you for trusting me with the truth." As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Rachel felt something she had not experienced in a very long time. Hope. Hope that her future might be different from her past. Hope that she might find the kind of love she had once dreamed of as a girl. Hope that Samuel Briggs might be the man to show her what real partnership looked like. The next few months were some of the happiest of Rachel's life. Samuel courted her with old-fashioned propriety, always mindful of her past trauma and careful not to push too hard or too fast. He brought her wildflowers he found on the range, their simple beauty more precious to Rachel than any expensive bouquet. He asked her opinions on ranch matters and actually listened to her suggestions. He taught her to ride properly, patiently guiding her through the basics until she felt confident enough to ride out to the pastures with him. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Samuel told her about his childhood, the poverty he had known, the struggle his mother had faced raising 2 children alone after finally leaving his father. He told her about his sister, Margaret, who had married a shopkeeper in Sacramento and now had 3 children of her own. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, his hopes to expand the herd, his desire to build something lasting that he could be proud of. Rachel shared what she was comfortable sharing about her own past. She told him about growing up in a small farming community, about the joy she had known before her father's death and the desperation that had followed. She told him about her younger siblings and her mother, and the guilt she still felt about leaving them behind, even though she knew staying would have destroyed her. "Do you want to contact them?" Samuel asked one Sunday afternoon as they sat on the porch, watching the sun paint the western sky in shades of orange and pink. "Let them know you are safe." "I am afraid," Rachel admitted. "What if Samuel Whitmore is watching them, waiting for me to reach out? What if I lead him right to me?" Samuel considered this carefully. "What if I sent a letter on your behalf? Not from you directly, but from an employer saying that a woman matching your description is employed here and is doing well. No return address mailed from Sacramento, so it cannot be traced to Red Bluff. Your mother would know it was about you, but anyone watching would not have enough information to track you down." It was a thoughtful compromise, and Rachel agreed. 2 weeks later, she received a reply addressed to the Briggs Ranch. Her mother's letter was brief, but heartfelt. She thanked the unknown employer for caring for her daughter and assured them that she understood why Rachel had left. She also mentioned that a man had come around asking questions about Rachel's whereabouts, but she had told him she had no knowledge of where her daughter had gone. The man had not been back since, which hopefully meant he had given up the search. Rachel cried when she read the letter, but they were cleansing tears. Her mother did not hate her for leaving. Her family understood. It was more than she had dared to hope for. As fall turned to winter, Rachel found herself falling deeply in love with Samuel Briggs. It was not the desperate, grasping feeling she had experienced when Samuel Whitmore had paid attention to her. Instead, it was a steady, growing warmth, a sense of safety and belonging that made her feel like she had finally come home. Samuel was everything she had dreamed a partner should be. He was kind without being weak, strong without being domineering. He worked alongside his men rather than simply ordering them around. He treated Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen with genuine respect, not just as employees but as valued members of his household. He was generous with his wages but careful with his spending, building his success through hard work and smart decisions rather than exploiting others. And he was patient with Rachel in a way that made her want to weep with gratitude. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give. When he kissed her for the first time on a crisp November evening under a sky full of stars, it was gentle and sweet, asking rather than demanding. When she pulled back, overwhelmed by the intensity of her own feelings, he simply smiled and told her they had all the time in the world. But Rachel knew that time was not necessarily on their side. She was still legally married to Samuel Whitmore, and until that was resolved, she and Samuel Briggs could not truly move forward with their lives. In early December, Samuel made a trip to Sacramento to consult with a lawyer about Rachel's situation. He was gone for 4 days, and Rachel spent every minute worrying about what he would discover. When he finally returned, his expression was serious but not despairing. "The lawyer says you have grounds for divorce," Samuel told her that evening, after the others had retired and they had privacy in the main room. "Desertion, fraud regarding the nature of the marriage, and the fact that plural marriage is illegal under federal law all work in your favor. The challenge is that filing for divorce means potentially exposing your location." "So what do we do?" Rachel asked, her stomach churning with anxiety. "The lawyer suggested filing in California rather than Utah, using the fact that you have been residing here for several months. It gives you home field advantage, so to speak. California courts are not sympathetic to plural marriage, and judges here are more likely to rule in your favor quickly. Samuel Whitmore would have to come to California to contest it, which exposes him to potential federal prosecution for practicing plural marriage. The lawyer thinks he is more likely to let you go than risk that." It made sense, but Rachel still felt afraid. "And if he does come?" Samuel took her hands in his grip firm and reassuring. "Then I will be there with you. You will have the best legal representation we can afford, and you will have me standing beside you, making it very clear that you are not going back to that life. Rachel, I know this is scary, but we cannot move forward until we deal with your past. You deserve to be truly free." Rachel knew he was right. She had been living in a sort of limbo, neither fully married nor fully divorced, unable to move forward with her life. "All right," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Let us file for the divorce. I want to be free of him." The paperwork was filed in January of 1879. The waiting period was agonizing. Every time a stranger came to Red Bluff, Rachel felt a spike of fear. Every unexpected sound made her jump. But Samuel was true to his word, staying close and making sure she never felt unprotected. The divorce hearing was scheduled for late February. Samuel insisted on accompanying Rachel to the courthouse, along with the lawyer he had hired, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Garrison, who specialized in family law. Mrs. Chen came as well, both for moral support and to serve as a character witness if needed. Rachel had been terrified that Samuel Whitmore would appear to contest the divorce, but as the hearing time came and went with no sign of him, she began to dare to hope. Mr. Garrison presented the case efficiently, laying out the facts of the fraudulent marriage, the illegal nature of plural marriage under federal law, and Rachel's need to move forward with her life. The judge, a stern-faced man in his 60s, listened carefully and asked a few pointed questions. "Mrs. Turner, or should I say Mrs. Whitmore," the judge said, addressing Rachel directly, "do you understand that divorce is a serious matter and not to be undertaken lightly?" "I do, Your Honor," Rachel said, her voice clear despite her nervousness. "But I also understand that a marriage should be between two people who honor and respect each other. I was deceived about the nature of my marriage and forced into a situation I would never have consented to if I had known the truth. I do not wish to remain bound to a man who views wives as collectibles." The judge's stern expression softened slightly. "And you have established residency here in California?" "Yes, Your Honor. I have been living and working at the Briggs Ranch since July of last year. I have witnesses who can attest to my employment and character." The judge glanced at the papers before him, then at Samuel Whitmore's empty chair. "Very well. Given that the respondent has not appeared to contest these proceedings, and given the illegal nature of plural marriage under federal law, I am granting this petition for divorce. Mrs. Whitmore, you are hereby legally separated from Samuel Whitmore, with all rights and privileges pertaining thereto. You are free to resume your maiden name if you so choose, and you are free to remarry should you wish. This court is adjourned." The gavel came down, and just like that, Rachel was free. Truly, legally free. She felt like she might faint from relief, but Samuel was there, his hand on her elbow, steadying her. Outside the courthouse, in the weak February sunshine, Samuel pulled Rachel into a fierce hug. "You did it," he whispered into her hair. "You are free." "We did it," Rachel corrected, pulling back to look up at him. "I could not have done this without you, Samuel. You gave me the courage and the means to fight for my freedom." "And now?" Samuel asked, his eyes searching hers. "What happens now, Rachel Turner?" Rachel smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Now I want to live, really live. I want to make choices for myself. I want to build a future that is mine. And Samuel, if you are still willing, I would very much like to build that future with you." "There is nothing I want more," Samuel said, and then he was kissing her right there on the courthouse steps, not caring who saw, and Rachel was kissing him back, pouring all of her hope and love and gratitude into that single perfect moment. They were married in April of 1879, in a simple ceremony at the ranch with only a handful of people present. Samuel's sister Margaret came with her husband and children. Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen were there, along with Tom, David, and the other ranch hands. The local minister performed the ceremony under a clear blue sky with wildflowers blooming across the pastures and the sound of cattle lowing in the distance. Rachel wore a dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her sew from beautiful cream-colored fabric that Samuel had purchased in Sacramento. It was simple but elegant, with no pretensions or false modesty. She wore her hair down, a symbol of her freedom to make her own choices, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Samuel had gathered for her that morning. When the minister asked if Samuel would take Rachel as his wife, Samuel's response was firm and clear. "I will, and I promise before everyone gathered here that she will be my only wife, today and for the rest of my life. There will never be another. Just Rachel. Always and forever." Rachel felt tears streaming down her face as she made her own vows, promising to stand beside Samuel as his partner and equal, to work with him to build their life together, and to love him with all the strength and courage he had helped her discover within herself. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Samuel kissed her with such tender passion that several of the wedding guests cheered. Rachel laughed through her happy tears, overwhelmed by the joy of the moment. The celebration that followed was modest but heartfelt. Mrs. Chen had prepared a feast, and there was music and dancing as the sun set over the ranch. Rachel danced with Samuel, with Tom, with Mr. Chen, and even with Samuel's brother-in-law. She laughed more that day than she had in all of her previous marriage combined. That night, in the room that was now officially hers and Samuel's, Rachel discovered what true intimacy could be. With Samuel, there was no pressure, no performance, no sense that she was just one of many. There was only the two of them learning each other, giving and receiving pleasure with equal measure, creating something beautiful and wholly their own. "I love you," Samuel whispered as they lay tangled together in the aftermath, the moonlight streaming through the window. "I love you, Rachel Briggs." Rachel smiled at the sound of her new name. Not Rachel Whitmore, which had never truly been hers. Not even Rachel Turner, which belonged to her past. Rachel Briggs, a name that represented her future, her choice, her freedom. "I love you too," she whispered back, "more than I ever thought possible." Life settled into a new rhythm after the wedding. Rachel was no longer just the household assistant, but the lady of the ranch, a role she took seriously. She continued to work alongside Mrs. Chen, but now she also helped Samuel with the business side of the ranch, keeping the books and managing correspondence with buyers. She discovered she had a knack for numbers and organization, and Samuel relied on her input for major decisions. The ranch continued to prosper. They expanded the herd, purchased additional land, and hired 2 more hands to help manage the growing operation. Samuel's reputation as a fair and honest rancher spread, and he had no trouble selling his cattle at good prices. In the fall of 1879, Rachel discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complex mix of emotions. She was thrilled at the prospect of having a child with Samuel, but she was also terrified, haunted by memories of the women in Samuel Whitmore's compound who had treated pregnancy as a competition, fighting for status and attention based on how many children they produced. Samuel sensed her anxiety and held her close, reassuring her with words and actions. "This is our child, Rachel, ours alone, not a way to gain status or prove anything to anyone, just a little person who will be loved and wanted for exactly who they are. And you are going to be an amazing mother because you know what it feels like to not have choices, so you will raise our children to think for themselves." His words helped, but Rachel's anxiety did not fully dissipate until their son was born in June of 1880. The labor was long and difficult, but Mrs. Chen was there to guide her through it, and Samuel never left her side. When the baby finally emerged, red-faced and squalling, Rachel felt a rush of love so powerful it took her breath away. "A son," the doctor announced, handing the baby to Rachel after Mrs. Chen had cleaned him up. "A healthy, strong boy." Samuel looked down at his son with wonder in his eyes. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Rachel, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas Samuel Briggs, after Tom Harper and Samuel himself. Little Thomas was a content baby, easygoing and curious about the world around him. Rachel marveled at how different motherhood was when you were not competing for resources and attention, when your child was celebrated simply for existing rather than evaluated for their contribution to a collective. 2 years later, in 1882, their daughter was born. They named her Mary Catherine, after Samuel's mother and Rachel's maternal grandmother. Mary was a spirited child from the start, more demanding than her brother, but also more adventurous. She kept them on their toes, and Rachel often joked that Mary had inherited her father's stubbornness and her mother's determination to do things her own way. Life was not always easy. The ranching business had its ups and downs, with droughts, harsh winters, and fluctuating cattle prices keeping them constantly adapting. But Rachel and Samuel faced every challenge as a team, making decisions together and supporting each other through difficult times. In 1884, Mrs. Chen's health began to fail. She had developed a persistent cough that would not go away, and by winter it was clear she was seriously ill. Rachel took over most of the household duties, determined to care for the woman who had shown her such kindness. Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep in February of 1885, with her husband and Rachel by her side. The loss hit the entire ranch hard. Mrs. Chen had been more than an employee. She had been the heart of the household, the person who kept everything running smoothly. Rachel grieved deeply for the woman who had become like a mother to her, teaching her not just practical skills but also the importance of kindness and quiet strength. Mr. Chen decided to return to San Francisco after his wife's death, wanting to spend his remaining years near the Chinese community there. Samuel arranged for a generous pension and helped Mr. Chen make the move. It was another reminder that life was constantly changing, that people came and went, but the bonds they formed mattered deeply. Rachel hired a young woman named Emma to help with the housework, a quiet girl from town who was grateful for the steady employment. It was strange at first being the one in charge rather than the assistant, but Rachel drew on the lessons Mrs. Chen had taught her and made sure Emma felt valued and respected. The ranch continued to grow. By 1886, they were running over 500 head of cattle, and Samuel had earned a reputation throughout the region for his quality stock and fair dealing. They built an addition onto the house, adding more bedrooms and a proper office for Rachel to manage the books. Samuel joked that she was better at the business side of ranching than he was, and there was truth in his jest. In the spring of 1887, Rachel received an unexpected letter. It was from her mother, forwarded through the same circuitous route they had established years earlier. Her mother wrote that Samuel Whitmore had died the previous winter from pneumonia. With his death, the compound had fallen apart. The first and second wives had left with their children, and the third wife had moved in with relatives. Her mother wanted Rachel to know that she was truly free now, that there was no longer any threat of Samuel Whitmore coming to reclaim her. Rachel read the letter several times, trying to process her feelings. She did not mourn Samuel Whitmore, but she felt a strange sense of closure. That chapter of her life was truly over. She shared the news with Samuel that evening as they sat on the porch after the children had been put to bed. "How do you feel?" Samuel asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Free," Rachel said simply. "I have felt free since the divorce, but knowing he is gone removes even the shadow of fear I did not realize I was still carrying. And relieved for those other women that they were able to leave and make new lives for themselves. I hope they found happiness." "You have a kind heart," Samuel said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "To wish them well after everything." "They were victims too," Rachel said, "just like I was. We all deserve better than what he offered." In 1888, their third child was born, another son they named William Henry, after no one in particular, but simply because they liked the name. William was a sweet-natured child who loved animals and spent hours following his father around the ranch, learning everything he could about cattle and horses. As the children grew, Rachel made sure they understood the value of education and independent thinking. She taught them to read and write using books ordered from San Francisco and Sacramento. Samuel taught them practical skills like riding, roping, and animal husbandry. Together, they raised children who were confident, capable, and kind. Thomas grew into a thoughtful young man who had his father's head for business and his mother's organizational skills. Mary was fearless and adventurous, the first one to try anything new and the fiercest protector of her younger brother. William was gentle and patient, with a special gift for understanding animals that made him invaluable around the ranch. In 1890, now in their mid-30s, Rachel and Samuel sat on their porch on a warm summer evening, watching their children play in the yard. Thomas was 12 and already as tall as his mother. Mary was 8, all wild curls and boundless energy. William was 2, toddling around after his siblings and laughing with pure joy. "Do you ever regret it?" Samuel asked, a question he had asked before over the years, but which never failed to prompt serious reflection. "Leaving?" Rachel asked, knowing what he meant. Never. Not for a single moment. My only regret is that it took me 8 months to find the courage to do it. And everything that came after? Samuel pressed, though his smile suggested he already knew the answer. Rachel turned to look at her husband, this man who had given her everything she had never dared to dream of. He had kept every promise he had ever made to her. She was his only wife. She was his equal partner. She was loved and cherished not for what she could provide, but simply for who she was. Everything that came after has been the life I was always meant to live, Rachel said softly. You kept your promise, Samuel. I have always been your only, and you have always been mine. Samuel pulled her close, and they sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children and listening to the sounds of the ranch around them. The cattle lowing in the distance, the horses nickering in the corral, the wind rustling through the grass. These were the sounds of home, of safety, of a life built on love and mutual respect. The years continued to pass in a tapestry of ordinary moments that added up to an extraordinary life. There were challenges, of course, a hard winter in 1891 that tested their resources, a summer drought in 1893 that forced them to drive the cattle to higher pastures, the usual childhood illnesses and injuries that came with raising 3 active children. But there were also moments of perfect joy. Thomas's first successful cattle drive at age 15, Mary learning to break horses with a skill that rivaled the best of the ranch hands, William discovering a talent for breeding cattle, carefully selecting which animals would produce the best offspring, birthday celebrations and holiday gatherings, quiet evenings with just Rachel and Samuel, stealing moments of intimacy and connection amidst the chaos of family life. In 1895, a neighboring rancher approached Samuel about possibly merging their operations. The man was getting older and had no children to pass the ranch to. After careful consideration and many discussions with Rachel, Samuel agreed to purchase the neighboring land, nearly doubling the size of their operation. It was a massive undertaking, but with Thomas now 17 and ready to take on more responsibility, they felt ready for the challenge. The expanded ranch meant hiring more hands and building additional structures. Rachel found herself managing a household staff of 3 and overseeing the feeding of 12 workers. It was exhausting but satisfying work, and she loved seeing the ranch grow and thrive. In 1897, when Thomas was 19, he announced his intention to marry a young woman named Sarah from Red Bluff. Rachel and Samuel both liked Sarah, a practical and kind-hearted girl who was not afraid of hard work. The wedding was held at the ranch, and Rachel could not help but think about how different the ceremony was from her first wedding. Thomas and Sarah were marrying for love, as equals, with no deception or hidden agendas. They were starting their life together with honesty and openness, the way marriage was meant to be. Samuel built Thomas and Sarah a small house on the ranch property, giving the young couple privacy while keeping them close enough to help with the operation. Within a year, Rachel became a grandmother for the first time when Sarah gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. Holding her granddaughter, Rachel marveled at the life she had built, the family she had created, the legacy of love and freedom she was passing down. Mary, true to her independent spirit, announced at 16 that she wanted to attend a women's college in San Francisco. It was an unconventional choice for a ranch girl, but Rachel and Samuel supported her dream. They had always encouraged their children to pursue their passions, and if Mary wanted an education beyond what they could provide at home, they would make it happen. Mary left for San Francisco in 1898, and though Rachel missed her terribly, she was proud of her daughter's courage and ambition. William, now 10, showed every sign of becoming the heart of the ranch's future. He had a gift for understanding cattle that went beyond simple animal husbandry. He could look at a cow and know if she was healthy, predict when a difficult birth would occur, select the best bulls for breeding. Samuel often said that William had been born for ranching in a way that even he had not been. As the new century approached, Rachel and Samuel found themselves entering middle age with a sense of contentment and accomplishment. The ranch was thriving, their children were happy and healthy, and they had built something meaningful together. On New Year's Eve, 1899, as the 19th century gave way to the 20th, they stood together on their porch, looking out over land they had worked with their own hands, watching the stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns. "We made it," Samuel said, his arm around Rachel's waist. "When I met you in that restaurant 21 years ago, I never imagined all of this. The ranch, the children, the grandchildren. You have given me everything I ever wanted and so much more." Rachel leaned into her husband's embrace, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "You saved my life," she said, not for the first time, but with no less sincerity. "You gave me freedom and love and a life worth living. Every day I wake up grateful that I was brave enough to run, and that I was lucky enough to run straight to you." "Not luck," Samuel corrected gently. "Fate. We were meant to find each other, Rachel. I truly believe that." As the clock struck midnight and the new century began, Samuel kissed his wife with the same passion and devotion he had shown since the beginning. And Rachel kissed him back, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together as they always had. The first decade of the 20th century brought new changes and challenges. Automobiles began appearing in Red Bluff, though Samuel remained skeptical of the noisy machines and preferred his horses. Electricity came to town, though the ranch remained lit by lanterns and candles for several more years. The world was modernizing rapidly, but the fundamental rhythms of ranch life remained constant. Mary returned from San Francisco in 1902 with a teaching certificate and a fiancé, a young lawyer named Robert Harrison. Rachel liked Robert immediately. He was intelligent and ambitious, but also kind and respectful. He reminded her a bit of Samuel, with his quiet confidence and genuine decency. Mary and Robert married in the summer of 1902 and settled in Red Bluff, where Mary began teaching at the local school, and Robert established his legal practice. Thomas and Sarah gave Rachel and Samuel 3 more grandchildren, a son named Samuel James in 1900, twin girls named Helen and Grace in 1903. The ranch house was constantly filled with the sounds of children playing and laughing, and Rachel loved every chaotic moment. She thought often of the lonely, desperate young woman she had been when she first arrived in Red Bluff, and marveled at how much her life had changed. William married at 21, choosing a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread. Her name was Catherine, and she fit into ranch life as if she had been born to it. William and Catherine built their own house on the property, and soon the ranch was being run by 2 generations of Briggs men working side by side. In 1905, Samuel began experiencing health problems. He was 51 years old and had spent decades doing hard physical labor under the harsh California sun. The doctor diagnosed him with a heart condition and advised him to slow down to let his sons handle more of the heavy work. Samuel agreed reluctantly, not because he did not trust Thomas and William, but because ranching was in his blood and slowing down felt like giving up. Rachel watched her husband carefully during this time, making sure he followed the doctor's orders, organizing his days so he could still be involved in the ranch without overdoing it. She had promised to stand by him in sickness and health, and she took that promise seriously. Samuel chafed at the restrictions but admitted in private moments with Rachel that he was grateful for her fierce protectiveness. They adapted their routines, taking more time for leisure activities they had once been too busy for. They took long, slow rides around the property, just the 2 of them, reminiscing about the past and planning for the future. They spent evenings on the porch, watching the sunset and counting their blessings. They made love with the comfortable intimacy of people who had shared a bed for over 25 years, finding new ways to express their devotion as their bodies aged and changed. In 1908, Rachel turned 50 years old. Her children threw her a surprise party at the ranch, with all of her grandchildren and many friends from town in attendance. As Rachel looked around at the celebration, at the family she had helped create, at the life she had built from the ashes of her escape, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Mary gave a speech, talking about her mother's strength and courage, about the lessons she had learned from watching Rachel build a life on her own terms. Thomas spoke about his parents' partnership, about how his father had always treated his mother as an equal, and how that example had shaped his own marriage. William simply hugged his mother and whispered, "Thank you for being brave enough to run. Thank you for giving us this life." Samuel gave the final toast, raising his glass and looking at his wife with eyes full of love. "To Rachel Briggs, the bravest woman I have ever known. You could have given up when life was hard. You could have accepted a fate you did not choose. Instead, you fought for your freedom and built something beautiful. You have been my only wife, my best friend, my truest partner. Here is to 50 more years." Everyone cheered, and Rachel laughed through happy tears, knowing that 50 more years was probably not realistic, but appreciating the sentiment. As the party continued around them, Samuel pulled Rachel aside for a private moment. "I meant every word," he said seriously. "You have been the greatest blessing of my life. Everything good I have came from meeting you that day in Red Bluff. Our children, our grandchildren, this ranch, this life. It all started with you being brave enough to run, and me being lucky enough to be there when you did." "I would run to you again," Rachel said, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "1,000 times over, I would make the same choice. You kept your promise, Samuel. I was always your only, and you were always mine." They kissed then, ignoring the good-natured teasing from their children and the odd giggles of their grandchildren. Let them tease. Rachel and Samuel had earned their happiness, fought for it, built it with their own hands. Their love was not a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real, tested by time and hardship, and emerged stronger for it. The next few years passed peacefully. Samuel's health stabilized with proper care and reduced workload. The ranch continued to prosper under the joint management of Samuel, Thomas, and William. Mary's teaching career flourished, and she became a beloved figure in Red Bluff's educational community. The grandchildren grew and thrived, each one unique and precious. In 1912, Rachel received word that her mother had passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72. Rachel traveled back to Utah Territory, now the state of Utah, for the funeral. It was her first time returning since her escape 34 years earlier. The landscape looked the same, but Rachel felt like a different person. She was no longer the desperate young woman who had fled in the night. She was a successful rancher's wife, a mother and grandmother, a woman who had built a life worth living. Her siblings gathered around her, marveling at the transformation. They shared stories about their mother, about the difficult years after Rachel had left, about how things had gradually improved. Her younger sisters had married decent men, one-wife marriages built on love rather than religious obligation. Her brother had become a carpenter and was doing well. They were all, in their own ways, free. "Mother was so proud of you," Rachel's youngest sister told her at the wake. "She used to tell us that you were the brave one, the one who had the courage to demand better. She said you inspired her to make sure the rest of us did not settle for less than we deserved." Rachel cried then, grieving not just for the loss of her mother, but for all the years they had spent apart, for the relationship they could have had if circumstances had been different. But she also felt grateful that her mother had understood, had supported her choice even from a distance, had used Rachel's example to guide her other children toward better lives. Samuel had come with Rachel to Utah, refusing to let her make the journey alone. He met her siblings and was welcomed warmly into the family. They stayed for a week, and before they left, Rachel visited her old family home one last time. She stood in the yard where she had played as a child, remembering the girl she had been before everything changed. That girl had been innocent and hopeful, not yet touched by the harsh realities of the world. Rachel missed that innocence, but did not regret losing it. Growing up, painful as it was, had been necessary. It had made her strong enough to survive, brave enough to run, and wise enough to build something better. As they traveled back to California, Rachel felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had made her peace with her past, honored her mother's memory, and reconnected with the family she had left behind. Now she could fully embrace her present and future, unburdened by lingering guilt or regret. Life continued its steady march forward. More grandchildren were born. The ranch modernized gradually, adding trucks to supplement the horses, installing electricity, improving the house and outbuildings. Samuel and Rachel celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary in 1909 with a large party that became a legend in Red Bluff. They renewed their vows, with Samuel once again promising that Rachel would be his only wife, and Rachel promising that he would be her only husband, the only man she would ever love. In 1915, the world seemed to be falling apart with war raging in Europe. But the Briggs Ranch remained an island of peace and stability. Thomas and William had taken over most of the day-to-day management, allowing Samuel to truly retire. He was 61 years old and content to spend his days advising his sons, playing with his grandchildren, and spending time with Rachel. They took a trip to San Francisco that year, their first real vacation in decades. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate at fancy restaurants, saw a show, and walked along the waterfront holding hands like young lovers. It was a second honeymoon of sorts, a celebration of a marriage that had lasted over 3 decades and only grown stronger with time. On their last night in San Francisco, as they stood on their hotel balcony looking out over the city lights, Samuel turned to Rachel with a serious expression. "I want you to know something," he said quietly. "If I had my life to live over, I would not change a single thing. Well, maybe I would have been braver earlier and asked you to marry me sooner, but everything else, every decision, every challenge, every moment of joy and sorrow led me to this perfect life with you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Rachel Briggs." Rachel felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears. "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You saved me, Samuel, not just from a bad situation, but from a life without love, without choice, without meaning. You showed me what real partnership looks like. You kept your promise. Through everything, through 36 years, you kept your promise. I was always your only." "And you were always mine," Samuel replied, pulling her into his arms. They stood there in the San Francisco night. 2 people who had built a life together from absolutely nothing, who had overcome every obstacle, who had created a legacy of love that would last for generations. This was not the life Rachel had imagined as a young girl in Utah territory. It was so much better. Samuel lived until 1920, passing away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 66. Rachel held his hand as he took his last breath, her heart breaking even as she was grateful that he had not suffered. They had been married for 41 years, together for 42, and not a day had passed without him proving his love for her. He had kept his promise until the very end. She was his only wife, his only love, his only choice. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people. Samuel Briggs had been a respected member of the community, known for his fairness, his integrity, and his devotion to his family. But it was Tom Harper, now in his 80s and long retired, who gave the eulogy that best captured who Samuel had been. "Samuel Briggs was the finest man I ever knew," Tom said, his voice wavering with age and emotion. "He built this ranch with his own 2 hands and a whole lot of determination. But his greatest accomplishment was not the land or the cattle. It was the family he built with Rachel. He loved that woman with everything he had, and he never let her doubt it for a single second. He made her a promise the day he met her, and he kept it for 42 years. That is the measure of a man." Rachel buried her husband on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple headstone that read, "Samuel Briggs, 1854-1920, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He kept his promises." The grief was overwhelming at first, but Rachel was not alone. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her with love and support. The ranch continued to operate under Thomas and William's capable management. and Rachel found purpose in caring for her ever-growing family and preserving Samuel's legacy. She lived for another 15 years, passing away in 1935 at the age of 76. In those final years, she saw her great-grandchildren born, watched the ranch continue to thrive, and knew that everything she and Samuel had built would endure. She wrote down her story, wanting future generations to understand where they came from, to know about the courage it took to run and the love that made it all worthwhile. Rachel's last words, spoken to Mary, who sat beside her bed, were simple and true. "I had a good life. I was loved completely by a man who kept his promises. I raised children who are kind and strong. I built something meaningful. I have no regrets. Tell them all that I have no regrets." She was buried beside Samuel on the hill, her headstone reading, "Rachel Briggs, 1858-1935, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She was brave enough to run and wise enough to stay." The Briggs Ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family with the understanding that it represented more than just land and cattle. It represented freedom, choice, and the power of a love built on mutual respect and unwavering commitment. Samuel's promise to Rachel that she would be his only wife became part of the family legend, a reminder that true love means choosing one person every day and building a life together as equals. And so the legacy of Rachel Turner and Samuel Briggs lived on, a testament to the idea that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is run toward your freedom, and that the greatest gift you can receive is a love that asks for nothing but gives everything. Their story became a reminder that in the wild, often harsh landscape of the American West, the most powerful force was not violence or domination, but the quiet, revolutionary act of choosing to love fully, honestly, and completely. One woman, one man, one promise kept for a lifetime. That was the true treasure they had built together, and it was worth more than all the gold in California.